My daughter ripped my phone from my hands and slammed it on the floor. With a voice full of contempt, she said, "You won't need this anymore. I'll decide what's best for you." The screen shattered into a spider web of cracks, much like my heart had over the past few years. I stared at Alexia, barely recognizing the young woman who stood before me. At 28, she had her father's sharp features and my stubborn chin, but something in her eyes had changed, hardened. When had my sweet little girl become this controlling stranger? Mom, are you even listening? This is exactly why, Dad, and I need to manage everything for you. You're getting worse, she sighed dramatically, bending down to pick up the broken phone. I didn't respond. What was the point? For the past year, since Robert, my husband of 30 years, had convinced Alexia I was declining mentally, they'd systematically isolated me from friends, taken control of my finances, and monitored my every move, all while I watched. Silent and increasingly desperate. "We're doing this because we love you," Alexia continued, her voice softening slightly. "Dad says your paranoia and forgetfulness are getting worse. You need us." The words stung because I remembered a time when she would have defended me against anyone, even her father. But Robert had always been persuasive as the town's most respected financial advisor. People trusted him implicitly, including our daughter, including me, until I found those transactions. "I need to rest," I said quietly, my hands shaking slightly. "I think I'll lie down." Alexia's expression relaxed. "Good idea. Dad will be home late tonight. Some emergency with the Wilsons' accounts. I'll check on you before I leave for dinner with Marcus." Marcus, her fiancé, another financial advisor who worked for Robert's firm. I'd met him 3 times, and each time, something about his easy compliance with Alexia's stories about my condition made me uneasy. I retreated to my bedroom, the one place they still allowed me some privacy, though I suspected cameras had been installed somewhere. I closed the door and sat at the edge of my bed, hands pressed against my face. At 58, I wasn't young anymore, but I wasn't losing my mind either. The mental decline they insisted I was experiencing was their creation, a careful fabrication that had begun shortly after I'd questioned Robert about strange withdrawals from our joint accounts. "Investment opportunities," he'd explained dismissively. "Nothing you need to worry about, Elena." But I had worried. I'd always handled our household finances while Robert managed investments. Those withdrawals, $50, 000 here, $75,000 there, were unlike anything I'd seen in our 30 years together. When I'd pressed for details, showing him the statements, his face had darkened momentarily before softening into concern. "Honey, we discussed this last month. Don't you remember? The doctor said these memory lapses might happen. But we hadn't discussed it, and I hadn't seen any doctors. That was the beginning, small comments about my forgetfulness. I missed appointments I was certain I hadn't made. Keys and documents moved from where I'd placed them. Robert's concerned discussions with friends and family about my episodes. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. He'd convinced our daughter, our friends, even my sister Claire, who lived across the country. My attempts to explain were dismissed as confusion or paranoia, further evidence of my decline. I reached under my mattress and pulled out the small notebook I'd been keeping, dates, conversations, bank statements I'd managed to photograph before Robert locked me out of the accounts. My evidence that no one would believe. The doorbell rang, startling me. I quickly returned the notebook to its hiding place and listened. "Mrs. Harlow isn't accepting visitors," I heard Alexia say firmly. "I understand, but I'm not here to see Elena. I'm delivering these financial documents for Robert," a woman's voice, unfamiliar, professional. "I can take those." "I'm sorry, but Mr. Harlow specifically asked that I wait and give them to him personally. Confidential client information." I moved quietly to my bedroom door, opening it just a crack. From the top of the stairs, I could see a tall woman in a crisp business suit standing at our front door, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "Well, he won't be home for hours," Alexia said, irritation creeping into her voice. You'll have to come back tomorrow. The woman glanced at her watch. I see. Perhaps I could leave my card then. As she reached into her pocket, her eyes flicked upward, meeting mine through the narrow opening of my door. There was no change in her expression, but something in her gaze, a momentary sharpness, made me freeze. Here you are, she said, handing Alexia a business card. Please tell your father I'll be in touch. After Alexia closed the door, I retreated back to my bed, heart pounding. Something about that woman seemed oddly familiar, though I was certain we'd never met. 15 minutes later, I heard Alexia's footsteps approaching my door. Mom, I'm heading out to meet Marcus. Dad should be home around 9 o'clock. There's soup in the fridge if you get hungry. Her voice was gentler now, almost the daughter I remembered. Thank you, sweetheart, I managed, hating the tremor in my voice that she would interpret as another sign of weakness. I listened as she descended the stairs, grabbed her keys, and left. The house fell silent, and for the first time in days, I was truly alone. I waited another 10 minutes before moving to my window, watching Alexia's car disappear down the street. Then I pulled out my emergency burner phone, purchased months ago during a rare unsupervised trip to the pharmacy, paid for with cash I'd been secretly saving from household money. I had one chance to get this right. Tomorrow, everything would change. My fingers shook as I typed out the text message I'd rehearsed countless times in my mind. Ready? 10 a.m. tomorrow. Bring everything we discussed. I sent it to the only number programmed into the phone. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I showered and dressed, carefully choosing comfortable clothes and practical shoes. I packed a small bag with essentials and the notebook containing my evidence. At 7:30, I heard Robert leave for his morning tennis game, a Saturday ritual he never missed. Alexia wouldn't arrive until around noon. She always slept late on weekends. At precisely 9:45, I walked out the front door of the house where I'd lived for 28 years, locking it behind me. I didn't look back. By the time Alexia came to check on me later that day, she would find the note I'd left on my perfectly made bed. When she saw what I had done, I knew panic would set in not for my safety, but for what was about to be exposed. I sat in the small cafe 2 towns over, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea. I couldn't bring myself to drink. The morning crowd had thinned, leaving just a few patrons scattered among the tables. At precisely 10 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. The woman from yesterday, the one who had delivered documents to my house, walked in, scanning the room until her eyes found mine. She moved with confidence, sliding into the seat across from me. Elena, she said, not a question but a confirmation. I'm Meredith Hansen. Up close, I could see she was perhaps 10 years younger than me, her dark hair showing only a few strands of silver. Her eyes were sharp and observant. You were at my house yesterday, I said, keeping my voice low. How did you know who I am? Your sister Claire hired me. She placed a business card on the table, Hansen Investigations. I nearly knocked over my tea. Claire believes I'm. She did, Meredith corrected, until she received this. She slid a sealed envelope across the table. Claire's handwriting marked it as returned mail. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside was a birthday card I'd sent Claire 3 months ago, along with a handwritten letter detailing my suspicions about Robert, a letter I'd never actually mailed. Robert intercepted it, I whispered. The pieces are falling into place. He must have been going through my things. Meredith nodded. Claire received that envelope 2 weeks ago, forwarded anonymously. She called me immediately. But who would? We'll get to that, Meredith said, checking her watch. Right now, we need to move. Your husband has already been to the house. He found your note. My stomach clenched. In my letter, I'd written only that I needed time away to think, that I would be in touch when I was ready. I'd said nothing about my suspicions or plans. Still, Robert would know I'd escaped his carefully constructed cage. What about Alexia? I asked, thinking of my daughter. He's called her. She's on her way to the house now. Meredith stood. My car's out back. We have a lot to do today. I followed her to a nondescript sedan parked behind the cafe. As we drove, Meredith explained what she'd discovered in the 3 weeks since Claire had hired her. Your husband has been systematically draining accounts for nearly 2 years, not just. It's yours, but clients' funds too. He's incredibly careful, uses shell companies, makes everything look like legitimate investments. The Wilsons, I said, remembering what Alexia had mentioned yesterday. He said there was an emergency with their accounts. Meredith's gaze flicked to me in the rearview mirror. The Wilsons discovered discrepancies. Robert's been scrambling to cover his tracks. We arrived at a small motel on the outskirts of a neighboring town. Inside a modest room, I found my sister Claire waiting. Elena, she rushed forward, enveloping me in a tight hug. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I should have known better. Tears stung my eyes as I returned her embrace. Claire had always been my protector, my confidant. Robert had managed to drive a wedge between us, but here she was when I needed her most. There's someone else you need to meet, Meredith said, checking her phone. She should be here soon. Who? I asked, wiping away tears. The person who sent the envelope to your sister. 20 minutes later, a knock at the door announced her arrival. Meredith opened it, and I gasped. Mrs. Harlow, said Martha Wilson, the wife of one of Robert's wealthiest clients. We'd attended the same charity functions for years, but had never been close. Martha, you sent the letter? She nodded, taking a seat at the small table. I've been suspicious of Robert for months. Thomas, my husband, trusts him implicitly, but I noticed changes in our portfolio statements. When Thomas confronted him, Robert always had explanations that sounded reasonable. So you started watching him? Meredith said. Yes, I followed him one afternoon and saw him checking your mail before you got home. He opened several letters, including one addressed to Claire. The look on his face when he read it. Martha shuddered. I knew something was wrong. Martha made copies of everything before sending the original to Claire, Meredith explained. She's been our inside source ever since. My head was spinning, but what about the Wilsons' emergency Alexia mentioned? Martha's expression darkened. Thomas finally listened to me and requested a full audit of our accounts. Robert's been trying to prevent that from happening. We have evidence of embezzlement, Meredith said, opening her laptop. Not just from your accounts, but from at least 12 clients. The total is close to $3 million. I felt lightheaded. Where's the money? Some is in offshore accounts, some was used to fund a secret life your husband's been building. What do you mean? Meredith turned the laptop to face me. On the screen was a property listing for a beachfront home in Costa Rica, purchased 6 months ago by an LLC that traces back to Robert. She clicked to another tab. A woman in her 30s smiled back at me, her arm around Robert's waist. They stood on the deck of what appeared to be the same Costa Rica house. Her name is Vanessa Diaz, Meredith said gently. They've been seeing each other for almost 3 years. The room tilted. 3 years? While I was cooking his meals, sharing his bed, building our life together, Robert. It had been planning his escape with a younger woman using stolen money, our money, his client's money. Does Alexia know? I whispered. We don't think so, Claire said, squeezing my hand. But there's more. Meredith scrolled to another document. Your mental decline is documented in medical records from Dr. Phillips. Dr. Phillips, the name I'd heard mentioned but had never actually met. I've never seen this doctor. That's because he doesn't exist, Meredith said. The medical license number is fake. The office address is a vacant property Robert owns through another shell company. He created a false medical history for me, I said, the full extent of his betrayal hitting me. But why? If he wanted to leave, he could have just divorced me. Because of the prenuptial agreement you both signed, Claire reminded me. If he divorces you without cause, he gets nothing from your family's trust fund. The trust fund my parents had left me not massive, but substantial enough that Robert had insisted on managing it throughout our marriage. I'd thought little about it over the years, trusting him completely. If you were declared mentally incompetent, however, Meredith added, he could be appointed your guardian, and your guardian would have complete control over the trust. And Alexia? I asked. Where does she fit into this? Martha looked uncomfortable. Her fiancé, Marcus, he works for Robert. Is he involved? We're not sure yet, Meredith admitted. But here's what we do know. 2 days ago, Robert transferred a large sum to an account in Marcus' name. My phone, the burner phone, buzzed with a text message. I looked down and felt the blood drain from my face. What is it? Claire asked, alarmed. I held up the phone. The message was from an unknown number. Mom, where are you? Dad found your note. He's frantic. Please come home. We just want to help you. Alexia, I whispered. She can't know about this phone, Meredith said sharply. How did she get the number? Before I could answer, another message appeared. If you don't come home by tonight, we'll have to report you missing. The police will consider you a danger to yourself because of your condition. Please, Mom, don't make this worse. I stared at the screen, realization dawning. Robert. It's not Alexia, it's Robert using her phone. He's threatening me and letting us know he's still one step ahead, Meredith said grimly. The room fell silent as we all considered what this meant. Robert knew I had a secret phone. He was monitoring Alexia's communications, and now he was using my love for my daughter to try to lure me back. Martha was the first to speak. So what do we do now? Now, I said, finding strength in my anger, we set a trap of our own. The plan came together faster than I expected. Within hours, Meredith had arranged everything we needed, making calls to contacts whose identities she kept confidential. Claire and Martha worked alongside her, each bringing their own strengths to our improvised war room. I watched them with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. 3 days ago, I'd been a prisoner. In my own home now, I had allies, strong, capable women fighting for me. You need to respond to Robert's text, Meredith said, handing me back my burner phone. We need to buy time. I composed a careful message. I'm safe. Need space to think. Please don't involve police. We'll call tomorrow. Perfect, Meredith nodded. Vague enough to keep him guessing, but reassuring enough that he won't panic and do something rash. What if he traces the phone? Claire asked. He can't, Meredith assured us. It's a prepaid phone purchased with cash. Even if he has connections in the phone company, the most he could get is the general location when a text is sent, which is why we're sending it from here, Martha added, and then moving to another location immediately. The phone buzzed almost instantly with Robert's reply, Elena, please. Alexia's worried sick. Whatever's bothering you, we can work through it. I love you. I felt a bitter laugh escape my throat. He's good, isn't he? If I didn't know better, I'd believe him. Sociopaths often are excellent manipulators, Meredith said matter-of-factly. Their lack of empathy allows them to lie without the tells most people have. Is that what Robert is, a sociopath? The thought that I'd spent 30 years with someone capable of such calculated deception made me feel hollow. Labels aren't important right now, Claire said gently. What matters is stopping him. An hour later, we checked into a different motel under Martha's name, paying cash. The room was similar to the first, clean but basic, with 2 double beds and a small table by the window. What about Alexia? I asked as we settled in. It was the question that had been gnawing at me all day. How do we make her see the truth? That's going to be the most difficult part, Meredith admitted. She genuinely believes her father's story about your mental health. Direct confrontation likely won't work. She'll just see it as confirmation of your paranoia. We need evidence she can't dismiss, Martha suggested. Something so irrefutable that even Robert can't explain it away. The medical records, I said suddenly. Dr. Phillips doesn't exist, right? If we can show Alexia that the doctor diagnosing me isn't real, it's a start. Meredith agreed, but Robert could claim you're seeing a different doctor or that you're confused about the name. What about the offshore accounts? Claire suggested. Financial records proving he's been stealing again. He could claim those are legitimate investments you've forgotten about, Meredith countered. Remember, in Alexia's mind, you're the one who's confused. Martha had been quietly typing on her tablet. What about this? She turned the screen toward us, showing the photograph of Robert and Vanessa in Costa Rica. Infidelity is harder to explain away but easier to forgive, I said quietly. If it comes down to believing her father is unfaithful or her mother is mentally ill, which is easier for Alexia to accept? The room fell silent as we considered the problem. I think we're approaching this wrong, Meredith finally said. We shouldn't be trying to convince Alexia directly. We need to create a situation where she discovers the truth herself. How, I asked. By using Robert's playbook against him, Meredith smiled grimly. He's been gaslighting you for months, making you question your own sanity. What if we turn the tables? Over the next few hours, our plan took shape. It was risky with multiple moving parts, but if it worked, Robert would be exposed, not just to Alexia, but to everyone who mattered. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with everything I'd learned and everything still to come. Around 3 a.m., I slipped out of bed and sat by the window, watching the occasional car pass on the highway. Can't sleep? Claire whispered, joining me. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, I admitted. How could I have been so blind? Claire squeezed my hand. Because you loved him. Because you trusted him. That's not a weakness, Elena. It's what makes you human. I let him isolate me from everyone, even you, and now we're fixing that. She looked at me intently. You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, remember that. Morning came too quickly. Meredith arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and pastries, along with a middle-aged man she introduced as Detective James Fowler. James is an old friend, she explained. He works in financial crimes. The detective nodded at me. Mrs. Harlow, Meredith's filled me in. What your husband is doing crosses several legal boundaries: embezzlement, fraud, identity theft with those fake medical records. But we need solid evidence, I said. Yes, and we need to move carefully. If Robert suspects law enforcement involvement, he could transfer the remaining funds somewhere untraceable, which is why today's meeting is so important, Meredith added. Are you ready? I nodded, though my stomach was in knots. At 10 a.m., I would meet Robert at a public park. My suggestion, sent via text late last night, had him agreeing immediately, clearly relieved I was willing to talk. Little did he know what I had planned. 2 hours later, I sat on a bench near the park's central fountain, exactly where I told Robert to meet me. Meredith and Detective Fowler were positioned nearby, pretending to be a couple enjoying the morning. Claire and Martha waited in a car at the park entrance. I spotted Robert before he saw me. He was scanning the area, his customary confidence evident in his stride. When his eyes finally found me, relief washed over his features. Elena, he said, approaching cautiously. Thank God you're all right. I remained seated, my hands folded in my lap. Hello, Robert. He sat beside me, leaving a respectful distance between us. You had us worried sick. Alexia has been beside herself. Has she? I asked mildly. Or have you told her she should be worried? His expression flickered briefly before settling back into concerned husband mode. I don't understand. Why did you leave like that? If something's bothering you, we can talk about it. That's what I'm doing now, I said, talking about what's bothering me. I opened my purse and I removed a manila envelope, placing it between us on the bench. Robert's eyes fixed on it, a hint of weariness crossing his face. What's this? I met his gaze steadily. Evidence. The mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of anger quickly controlled. Elena, you're confused. This is exactly why Alexia and I are concerned. Costa Rica is beautiful this time of year, isn't it? I interrupted, especially that beachfront property you purchased 6 months ago, the one you visit with Vanessa. Robert went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I nudged the envelope toward him. It's all in there. The property records, the transfers from client accounts, the fake medical records for Dr. Phillips, a doctor who doesn't exist, who's been filling your head with these delusions. His voice had hardened. Is it Claire? I know she's always been jealous of our relationship. Stop. My voice was quieter than I intended, but it cut through his words like a knife. It's over, Robert. The lies, the manipulation, all of it. I know everything. His expression changed then, calculation replacing concern. He glanced around the park, then leaned closer. What exactly do you want, Elena? Money? A divorce? Name your price. I want my daughter back, I said simply. I want her to know the truth. Robert laughed, a cold sound that sent shivers down my spine. Alexia believes what I tell her to believe. She thinks her mother is losing her mind. Who do you think she'll trust? The father who's been taking care of both of you, or the unstable woman who disappeared without warning? Let's find out, I said, reaching back into my purse. I pulled out my phone, not the burner, but a new one Meredith had provided. I pressed a button and Robert's voice filled the space between us. Alexia believes what I tell her to believe. She thinks her mother is losing her mind. As the recording continued, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby tree. Alexia stood frozen, her face pale as she listened to her father's words in his own voice. Robert's eyes widened in genuine shock. Alexia, what are you doing here? She didn't answer him. Instead, she looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Mom? Her voice broke on the word. Is it true, everything you've been saying? Before I could respond, Robert was on his feet. Don't listen to her. This is exactly what I warned you about. She's manipulating you, using edited recordings to turn you against me. Is Dr. Phillips real? Alexia demanded, her voice stronger now. The doctor you said diagnosed Mom, does he exist? Of course he exists. She's seen him multiple times. Then why? Alexia said, pulling out a piece of paper from her jacket. When I called the medical board this morning, did they tell me there's no Dr. Phillips with that license number in the entire state? Robert's face contorted with rage, then quickly smoothed into a mask of paternal concern. It was fascinating and terrifying to witness his transformation, like watching an actor switch characters mid-scene. Alexia, honey, he said, his voice soft and reasonable, I don't know what your mother has told you, but you're misunderstanding the situation. Dr. Phillips might have recently changed practices or stopped it. Alexia cut him off. Her hands were shaking, but her voice remained steady. I called every Dr. Phillips in the state. None of them have ever treated Mom. The address you gave me for his office? It's an empty storefront. I watched my daughter with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. She had done her own investigating, something I hadn't anticipated. Despite everything Robert had told her, some part of her had harbored doubts. Robert's eyes darted between us, calculating his next move. This is absurd. I've been taking care of both of you for years. Why would I? Vanessa Diaz, I interrupted quietly. His head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. What? Your girlfriend? The house in Costa Rica? The money you've been stealing from clients to fund your new life. I reached into the envelope and pulled out several photographs. Martha Wilson has been very helpful. Martha? Robert's composure cracked. What does she have to do with this? She's been watching you, I explained. Ever since she noticed discrepancies in her husband's accounts. Mom, Alexia whispered, her eyes fixed on the photos of Robert and Vanessa. How long have you known? I suspected something was wrong for months, but I only learned the full truth yesterday. I took a deep breath. Your father has been gaslighting me, Alexia, making me and you believe I was losing my mind when really he was stealing money and planning to leave. Robert suddenly lunged for the envelope, but Detective Fowler appeared beside him, grasping his arm firmly. I wouldn't do that, Mr. Harlow, he said, flashing his badge. The color drained from Robert's face. Who are you? Detective James Fowler, Financial Crimes. He released Robert's arm, but positioned himself between us. We have some questions about certain irregularities in your client's accounts. Robert straightened his jacket, his lawyer mask sliding into place. I'm not discussing anything without my attorney present. That's your right, Fowler nodded, but we have enough to get warrants for your financial records, your home, and your office. Perhaps you'd like to cooperate now and make things easier on yourself. This is ridiculous, Robert snarled, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by my mentally unstable wife. Alexia stepped forward, placing herself at my side. Dad, I saw the medical records you showed me. I checked every detail. They're fake. You lied to me. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Robert's face as he realized his daughter was slipping away from his influence. Alexia, please. Everything I've done for us, for our future. By stealing, she demanded. By lying? By making me think my own mother was going crazy. You don't understand, he said desperately. Your mother's family money is tied up in that trust. I had to. Had to what? I asked quietly. Convince everyone I was incompetent so you could control my inheritance. While running off with your girlfriend, Meredith approached. Standing beside Detective Fowler, Mr. Harlow, we've been building a case against you for weeks. We have documentation of transfers from client accounts to offshore entities you control. We have evidence of the falsified medical records, and as of this morning, we have testimony from Vanessa Diaz herself. Roberts had jerked up. What? She's been very cooperative, Meredith continued, especially after learning you've been embezzling money. She thought you were wealthy from legitimate business. You got to Vanessa. His voice was barely audible. Costa Rican authorities picked her up this morning, Detective Fowler said. Seems she was quite surprised to learn about your existing family arrangements. Robert's shoulders slumped momentarily before he straightened again, his eyes calculating. Whatever you think you have, it won't hold up. I'm not saying another word without my lawyer. That's fine, Fowler said, nodding to a uniformed officer who was approaching. Robert Harlow, you're under arrest for suspicion of fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. As the officer led Robert away, I turned to find Alexia staring at me, her expression a mixture of confusion, pain, and dawning horror. Mom, I'm so sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I believed him. I helped him control you. Her voice broke on a sob. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as she cried against my shoulder. You didn't know, sweetheart. He manipulated both of us. But I should have seen it. The way he was so insistent about managing your medication, about keeping you isolated for your own good. I was so stupid. No, I said firmly, drawing back to look into her eyes. You trusted your father. That's what daughters do. But you also started questioning things, didn't you? You checked on Dr. Phillips yourself. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Marcus told me I should trust Dad completely, that questioning the doctor would just upset you unnecessarily. But something felt wrong. She paused, her expression hardening. Marcus, did he know? Was he part of this? We're not sure yet, I admitted, but Detective Fowler will be looking into that too. Claire and Martha approached us cautiously. Alexia looked surprised to see my sister. Aunt Claire, what are you doing here? Helping your mom, Claire said simply, giving Alexia a gentle hug. And this is Martha Wilson. She's been instrumental in uncovering what your father was doing. Alexia stared at Martha with dawning recognition. Mrs. Wilson, you and Mr. Wilson were at our house for dinner last month. Martha nodded. That's when I became certain something was wrong. I saw how your father treated your mother, the constant corrections, the little comments undermining her. It reminded me of my first husband. She touched Alexia's arm gently. Abusers don't always use their fists, dear. Alexia flinched at the word abuser, but didn't contradict it. What happens now? She asked instead. Now we go home, I said firmly. We reclaim our lives. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, meetings with financial investigators, and uncomfortable revelations. Marcus, it turned out, had indeed been aware of at least some of Robert's schemes. The money transferred to his account was intended as a handling fee for helping maintain the fiction of my mental decline. Alexia was devastated. "I was engaged to someone who was helping Dad gaslight you," she said one evening as we sat in the living room of our home, a home that felt both familiar and strange after everything that had happened. "He manipulated you too," I reminded her, though I couldn't help the anger that surged when I thought of how Marcus had encouraged her to doubt me, to report my every word and action to Robert. "I've been such a fool," she whispered. "We both were," I admitted, "but now we know better." A week after Robert's arrest, Alexia moved back home temporarily to help me sort through the financial mess he'd left behind. With Meredith and Detective Fowler's help, we were gradually untangling Robert's web of deceit. Some of the money had been recovered, though much was still missing. "There's something I need to show you," Alexia said one afternoon, her expression serious. She led me to her father's home office, a room I'd been avoiding. From a hidden compartment in his desk drawer, she pulled out a small black notebook. "I found this yesterday," she explained, placing it in my hands. "I think you should see it." I opened the notebook, my blood running cold as I read the first page. In Robert's precise handwriting was a detailed list of Elena's behaviors to document: forgetfulness, moving keys, wallet, phone regularly, confusion, changing plans without telling her, then acting concerned when she's unaware, paranoia, mentioning conversations that never happened. Each page that followed contained dated entries, a meticulous record of how he'd systematically gaslight me for months. The final pages held something even more chilling, a timeline for having me declared legally incompetent, with Alexia named as co-guardian alongside Robert. The last entry was dated just 3 days before I'd left, fully committed to the plan, with an appointment with Judge Morris scheduled for next month. Each showing increasing signs of distress. Perfect timing. After guardianship secured, Phase 2 begins. I closed the notebook, my hands trembling, not with fear now but with anger. "What was Phase 2? Alexia asked quietly. I looked up at my daughter, seeing the guilt and pain etched in her features. She had been a pawn in Robert's game, just as I had. "I don't know," I said truthfully, "but I think we need to find out." 6 months after Robert's arrest, I sat in the courthouse waiting room, smoothing my hands over the fabric of my new dress. The preliminary hearings had dragged on for months, but today would bring closure. Robert's plea deal was being finalized. "Nervous?" Alexia asked, taking the seat beside me. She looked professional and poised in her tailored suit, though I could see the tension in her shoulders. "Hadn't noticed Robert tampering with my mail." She waved away my thanks. "I know what it's like to have someone make you doubt yourself. My first husband was a master at it." She set the wine down, her expression thoughtful. "You know, when I first met you at those charity functions, I always thought you seemed constrained somehow, like you were holding yourself back." "I was," I admitted. "Robert always had very specific ideas about how I should behave, what I should say. After a while, it became second nature to filter everything through his expectations." "And now?" she asked. I smiled. "Now I'm discovering who I am without those filters. It's liberating." The doorbell rang, announcing Claire and Meredith's arrival. Soon, the dining room was filled with conversation and laughter, a stark contrast to the tense, controlled dinners of the past. "A toast," Claire said, raising her glass as we finished the main course. "To my brave sister who refused to be silenced." "To Mom," Alexia added, her eyes shining with tears and pride, "who taught me what real strength looks like." "To all of you," I countered, looking around at these women who had formed an unexpected circle of support around me for helping me find my voice again. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee, I noticed Alexia lingering by the family photos on the mantelpiece. I joined her, looking at the carefully curated images of our perfect family life. "It's strange," she said softly, looking at these now. "I can see how controlled everything was, how Dad positioned us exactly how he wanted, made sure every picture told the story he wanted to tell, the perfect family." I murmured, "I'm so sorry I didn't see through it sooner." She said, turning to me, "When you first started questioning things, I just accepted Dad's explanation that you were confused." I should have. "Stop," I interrupted gently. "We've been through this. You were manipulated too. The important thing is that when you had reason to doubt, you investigated. You found the truth." She nodded, though I could see the guilt still lingered. "Have you thought about what you'll do next, besides moving?" "Actually, yes," I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement. "I'm going back to school." "School?" Alexia looked surprised. "For my master's in art history. I started the program before I met your father but never finished it. It had been one of the first things Robert had subtly discouraged after our marriage, suggesting it was impractical, that I should focus on building our home instead." "Mom, that's amazing." Alexia hugged me tightly. "You'll be brilliant." Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in my bedroom, looking at the empty spaces where Robert's things had once been. The police had taken some items as evidence. I'd donated or discarded the rest. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. "Elena, it's David Wilson. Martha gave me your number. I heard what happened with Robert. Would you like to meet for coffee sometime? Just as friends?" "No." Pressure. David Wilson. Martha's brother-in-law. A quiet, thoughtful man I'd met briefly at charity events over the years. A widower who taught literature at the local university. I remembered his kind eyes, his genuine interest when I'd mentioned my love of art history. I found myself smiling as I typed a response. "Coffee sounds wonderful. How about Tuesday?" Setting the phone down, I moved to the window and looked out at the night sky. Tomorrow would bring more meetings with lawyers, more paperwork, more steps in the long process of disentangling my life from Robert's web of deceit. But for the first time in years, I felt truly free. 3 weeks later, I stood in the empty house for the last time. The furniture had been sold or moved to my new apartment. The walls were bare where family photos had once hung. My footsteps echoed in the vacant rooms. I walked through each space not with sadness, but with a sense of completion. This house had been both prison and home to me. Now it would belong to a young family eager to create their own memories within its walls. In the kitchen, where I'd prepared thousands of meals, where Robert had first begun criticizing my forgetfulness when I couldn't find items he'd deliberately misplaced, I placed a small envelope on the counter. Inside was a note for the new owners, wishing them happiness and harmony in their new home. My phone buzzed with a text from Alexia. "Waiting outside whenever you're ready." "Everything okay?" I typed back, "Just saying goodbye. Be right out." As I walked toward the front door, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror, the last item still hanging on the walls. I paused, studying the woman looking back at me. My hair had more silver than it had 6 months ago, and fine lines had deepened around my eyes, evidence of both stress and newfound laughter. But there was something else there too, a steadiness, a quiet confidence that had been missing for so long. I'd forgotten it was ever part of me. "Goodbye," I said softly to the empty house, to the woman I'd been, to the life I was leaving behind. I stepped outside into the bright spring sunshine, where Alexia waited by her car. Beside her stood Claire, Meredith, and Martha, my unlikely circle of warriors. "Ready?" Alexia asked, taking my bag. I looked back at the house one last time, then turned to the women who had helped me reclaim my life. "Ready," I said, and walked toward my future without looking back.